That day, we were having a barbecue in the garden with my daughter and son-in-law. Under the warm sunshine, the scent of cooking meat filled the air.
We're running low on beer. Emily, can you grab some more from the shed and put them in the fridge?
My husband, Mark, said to me. Sure. 4 or 5 cans, okay?
Hey, could you help Mom with that, John? Chill whatever beer we've got.
Our daughter, Chloe, asked her husband, John. With a smile, John readily agreed, of course, and followed me to the shed at the back of the garden. The shed was relatively new, and now just had several boxes of beer stocked up. As I went to lift a box from the back of the dimly lit shed, John, behind me, suddenly pressed down on my back, trying to force me to sit down on the ground. I reflexively twisted my neck and peeked at John's expression. Seeing his unusually desperate look, I instantly felt a fear that he might attack me. What? Hey, what's going on? I was about to scream in shock, but John whispered hurriedly, a bit flustered.
I'm sorry. Just a little patience.
What?
There's something I really need to check.
John, losing his usual gentle smile, looked at me intensely with a seriousness I had never seen before. And I would witness an incredible scene with him. My name is Emily. On a pleasantly warm spring day, after a short illness, my husband had passed away and gone to heaven. Since losing him, my daughter Chloe and I had been living quietly on our own, leading a modest life. Years of living just the two of us continued, and through a friend's introduction, I met a man named Mark. Mark was the same age as my late husband and slightly resembled him in stature. Initially, he was just a good friend, but gradually Mark and I began to be aware of each other. However, as I walked beside Mark and caught myself smiling, I couldn't help but feel terribly guilty.
There's no need to rush. I can wait forever,
Mark said with a calm smile, walking slightly ahead of me. Despite being drawn to his kindness, I continued to struggle with not being able to let go of my late husband. 7 years after my husband died, I passed my husband's grave over to his relatives. His sister gently placed her hand on my shoulder, and, though she didn't meet my gaze, she smiled kindly and said, "Thank you for everything." I bowed my head, hiding my tears, thinking I might never visit his grave again. A few months later, I decided to marry Mark. We moved to a new home, and I decided to start from scratch, throwing away all my clothes and furniture. I felt that keeping anything from my previous marriage would hurt Mark. Initially, Chloe was a bit bewildered by our marriage, but she gradually started to get along with Mark. Since they had often hung out together before our remarriage as friends, she adjusted surprisingly quickly. Chloe had just turned 15. She started wearing flashy makeup and going out, and it wasn't long before she began to sweet-talk Mark for spending money. Originally, our life as a mother and daughter wasn't wealthy, and I couldn't always afford to buy Chloe the things she wanted. In contrast to my strict approach to money, Mark was indulgent with Chloe. Without asking for details, if she said she was going out with her friends, he would immediately pull out his wallet and hand over money. When I later scolded Mark for this, he would look troubled and say,
sorry, but I feel like money is the only way I can get along with Chloe right now.
Mark continued to treat Chloe like a princess, making her feel very special. I was happy for her as if it were my own happiness. Mark was trying hard to love both me and Chloe. The only keepsake I had from my previous marriage was the wedding ring, which I kept at the very back of my closet and sometimes took out to look at. But feeling that even this was somehow wrong, I sent it to my former in-laws with a simple letter. I'm sorry, but I want to move forward. I don't know if it's okay for me to be happy. I don't know, but I sincerely wish to be happy. Eventually, Chloe became so close to Mark that she was always by his side. It was a delight for me, but I had my concerns.
Hey Dad, I want a new designer bag, but I'm a little short on allowance. What should I do?
Which one? What kind of bag is it?
Mark peered happily into the smartphone screen Chloe handed him. I glimpsed the screen briefly. It was a bag from a well-known brand even I recognized. Chloe scrolled to show the price, and Mark, looking a bit troubled, rubbed the back of his head.
It's quite pricey. But, well, wait, okay. If it's what Chloe wants.
Really? Yay. Thank you, Dad.
Chloe hugged him, and Mark smiled broadly, his mustache twitching with delight. Since getting married, I felt Chloe's sense of money was becoming skewed. Perhaps it was a reaction to her previously modest life, but she had started to ask Mark for things, always with a smile, rather than asking me. Chloe, stop wasting money.
It's okay. I'm not asking Mom anyway. Right, Dad?
Chloe and Mark looked at each other and laughed happily.
I'm going to marry a handsome and kind man like Dad someday.
At her words, Mark's smile grew even wider, his face crumpling into a grin. With that promise, Chloe returned to her room to study. She was seriously preparing for her nursing school exams, hoping to enroll after graduating from high school. To avoid distractions, we kept the TV off at home, and I had a small radio in the kitchen that was always on. Our life was very happy. It was so happy that I sometimes forgot that my previous husband had died. But occasionally, when a song from my youth played on the radio, I would remember him. The melody, the lyrics, they squeezed my heart, and I felt tears welling up.
Don't look so sad. It's okay. It's just one bag.
Mark said something completely off the mark, and I just smiled wryly. I realized I had to stop giving in to Chloe's requests for money. Mark, who had started his own business when he was young, sometimes wrote off payments as business expenses. It wasn't a commendable act, and it could affect the business's finances. So even when I strongly cautioned him, Mark continued to disregard my advice. You really spoil her. Those days continued until Chloe graduated from nursing school and started living on her own. As a nurse, she worked hard and did well. When Chloe turned 25, she began dating a man her age named John and eventually decided to marry him. When I first met John at our house, I was surprised, though I tried not to show it. Chloe had always declared, I'm going to marry a handsome man, yet her fiancé John, though a decent young man, was not the universally appealing type of handsome. John, who smiled gently and wore the attire of a well-bred heir, was, according to what I heard, the son of a wealthy family. After they married, they visited us often, and John was always kind to Mark and me, reassuring me deeply that my daughter had married a good man. One day, Mark suggested we have a barbecue in our garden. The weather was clear, with a brilliantly blue sky, and several birds were singing overhead. Mark, enthusiastic from early morning, expertly grilled the meat while chatting happily with Chloe. John was looking around, trying to spot the bald eagles singing overhead, but eventually he gave up and poured a drink into his glass.
Oh, looks like we're running out of beer. Emily, could you grab some more from the shed and put them in the fridge?
Got it. 4 or 5 cans good?
Hey, could you help Mom with that, John? Chill whatever beer we've got.
With a smile, John readily agreed, of course, and followed me to the shed at the back of the garden. The shed was relatively new, and now only had a few boxes of beer stocked up. As I tried to lift a box from the back of the dimly lit shed, John forcefully pressed down on my back, trying to make me sit on the ground. What? Hey, what's going on? Startled, I tried to scream, but John whispered in a slightly panicked tone.
I'm sorry. Just a little patience.
What?
There's something I really need to check.
Before I could ask what he wanted to check, he peeked out of the shed door, looking outside. The weather was good, and the garden's green grass was dazzlingly reflective. It's unlikely that Mark or Chloe could see us inside the dim shed. After a while, as we watched from a distance, Chloe leaned closer and nestled against Mark's arm. She rubbed her face against his upper arm and laughed happily. I could faintly hear their voices, but the singing of birds echoed in the shed, muddling their words. John watched them intently. Is he jealous of how close Chloe and Mark are? I couldn't help but laugh, and noticing my reaction, he pointed out, "Look." Chloe glanced around and then wrapped her arm around Mark. Mark seemed a bit flustered at first, but after looking around, he happily accepted her. Their closeness seemed more than just familial. The birds' song faded away. With no wind and no sound of insects, Mark and Chloe's voices, though faint, reached us clearly.
John, completely unaware. Funny, isn't it?
Well, you're the same, Emily. No one would imagine that.
But it's exciting and fun to have a relationship like this.
I was stunned, listening to their conversation. I couldn't grasp what was happening. Chloe took a clear bag containing a powdery substance from her pocket and mixed it into the glasses John and I had been drinking from. Did she put something in John's and my glasses?
That's probably a sleeping pill. She visited a psychiatrist recently without telling me.
Sleeping pills? She went to a psychiatrist without John knowing? I was bewildered by many things. But how should I take the fact that she had put sleeping pills in our drinks?
We should get out of here. It would be weird to stay here any longer. But don't use that glass.
Afterward, John and I returned to Mark and Chloe, pretending we knew nothing. Chloe looked a bit unnatural, glancing at my glass several times. The fact that my daughter tried to drug me was shocking enough, and I felt betrayed by her, making me dizzy. Sorry, I think I might have been out in the sun too much. I'll go inside and rest for a while.
Oh, okay, I'll clean up. You should rest.
I lay down on the bed in my room and stared blankly at the ceiling. Why would she put sleeping pills in the drink? and something about the closeness between Mark and Chloe felt off. My head throbbed with the thought of maybe, and the conflict of that can't be possible. After lying down for a while, I fell asleep. It was nearly evening when I woke up and went out to the garden where the cleanup was already done. John and Chloe seemed to be about to leave, and noticing me, John looked like he wanted to say something, then hesitantly shifted his gaze and remained silent.
Are you feeling better now?
After John and Chloe left, Mark approached me with his usual concern. But his words and voice sounded so deceitful that I forced a strained smile.
Do you still feel unwell? Shall I make something for dinner?
Mark rolled up his sleeves and started rummaging through the fridge. I remember there's still half of the meat we bought yesterday left. While thinking this, the image of Chloe slipping sleeping pills into my glass flashed back into my mind. I pushed Mark aside forcefully and said, "I'll cook," and quickly prepared a simple meal. I really can't bring myself to eat anything Mark makes right now. For the next few days, I hesitated to touch any of the food or beverages stocked at home. They might have been tampered with some kind of drug. Once I started thinking about the possibility of being monitored through hidden cameras or listening devices, living in my own home began to feel unbearable. One day, I received a message from John on my smartphone. It seemed he had discussed the incident involving the sleeping pills with his parents. John's parents, concerned for my well-being, offered to provide a temporary refuge for me. I think I'd go crazy if I continue living with Mark right now. I'm really grateful for your offer.
It's at a relative's vacation home, which isn't being used at the moment, so feel free to stay as long as you like. Also, I'd like to have a discussion with my parents involved if that's okay.
John's voice sounded somber over the phone. Of course, I agree. His wife might be having an affair with another man. And that man could be. No, I don't want to think about it now. Later, I lied to Mark, saying a friend invited me for a spa retreat. I had mentioned having persistent headaches since the barbecue and used the guise of needing rest, which my friend had suggested.
A spa retreat? That sounds good. Take your time and relax. Maybe I'll invite Chloe over and we'll have dinner at home.
Mark's casual response gave me such a chill of revulsion. Later, I traveled to the address John had given me and visited his relative's vacation home. John picked me up at the station after a series of train rides.
I'm sorry you had to come all this way.
He said he was sorry from the bottom of his heart. How can I not appreciate it? He went out of his way to arrange a place for me to hide. I felt a surge of gratitude for John's kindness. The area appeared to be a cluster of vacation homes, with pristine, seemingly uninhabited houses sporadically situated among a lot of trees. The vacation home itself was nestled among these trees. John's parents were waiting for me at the front door. It was the third time that I met John's parents. It was only at the time of the marriage family meeting, the wedding, and this time. I had heard from Chloe that they were quite wealthy, and I felt slightly intimidated. I thanked them for sheltering me. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry to rush this, but could we start the conversation inside?
Once inside, a discussion immediately began with John and his parents. Apparently, John had already told them about the sleeping pills incident. He also explained how Chloe's spending had inexplicably exceeded John's salary since their marriage. It was a painful thing for me to hear as her mother.
The source of the money Chloe is using is unclear, so I want to resolve that too. My parents will propose a donation to Mark's business as a way to let him show his cards a bit.
Let him show his cards. That phrase caught me. What will we find out by doing this? As I pondered the path ahead and what outcome it might bring, John looked intently into my eyes and smiled when our gazes met.
Perhaps we're just worrying over nothing. Shall we play a little trick to see if we can live peacefully again?
I couldn't help but laugh at John's suggestion. It's probably an overreaction. No, definitely not. We were merely trying to clarify a nearly certain answer. After a few days at the vacation home lent by John, I regained my composure and felt guilty about imposing for too long, so I decided to return home. A few weeks later, John's parents officially notified Mark's company of their intent to make a donation. Given their wealth, the proposal was readily trusted, and Mark and Chloe joyfully agreed without even verifying the specifics of the financial contribution. I quietly observed the two of them celebrating. Back at home, staying indoors became somewhat distressing, and I recently made it a routine to go for walks. Right in front of our house stretched a field of wheat, with green stalks of the same height covering the area. While walking on the lightly trafficked, paved road, I looked up at the birds flying in the distance. Life after the funding proposal was discussed became a spray of extravagance. Mark, assuming he had secured the funds, purchased a luxury car under the guise of a company vehicle. On the other hand, Chloe indulged in expensive beauty treatments and nail salons. Even if savings were depleted, they acted as if more money was on its way. Mark's naive calculations were transparent. One day, both families arranged a dinner meeting to discuss the funds. Mark and I, along with Chloe and John's family, gathered at our home. Mark thanked John's parents again and again.
I really look up to John. Chloe is always saying how happy she is to have married such a wonderful person.
Mark tried to flatter John's parents, but they set down the documents on the table without a smile. Thinking it was about the donation, Mark joyfully said, "Thank you," and began to read through the contents, his face gradually turning pale.
When we did some checks on your company as part of our investment due diligence, well, we discovered some shocking truths.
Mark, sweating profusely, read through the document. It contained two main points: evidence of an inappropriate relationship between Mark and Chloe, and a tax audit concerning expenses claimed as company costs. The evidence that my own daughter was involved with her stepfather made me want to cover my face. Chloe had been getting Mark to buy her luxury items and beauty treatments, all falsely claimed as business expenses, resulting in back taxes.
We can't possibly invest in a company like this.
But it's too late now.
Mark was upset and spilled the tea before him. Soon Chloe, who was nearby, sat up to wipe the tea with her trembling hands.
Chloe, we're getting a divorce, and I'll be seeking alimony.
What? What do you mean, alimony?
You were unfaithful. It's only natural. And also Emily will do.
John turned to look at me. Mark, still staring at the documents, turned his fearful eyes towards me. Of course, I'm divorcing Mark, and I'm going to ask him for alimony.
What nonsense are you spouting? How could this be?
Mark choked on his words, shaking as he dropped the documents to the floor. Chloe, looking terrified, approached Mark and pointed at John, her lips quivering.
It's not true. The real cheater is John. John and Mom were having an affair.
Until the very end, Chloe spewed nonsensical excuses and tried to shift the blame. Mark and Chloe made futile attempts to deny the accusations, but the conclusive evidence made it impossible to escape the truth. Eventually, as if resigning himself to the reality, Mark slumped his shoulders and quietly began to speak. He admitted to having been involved with Chloe, acknowledging that there was no love in their relationship. Initially, he had resisted Chloe's advances, which were motivated by financial gain. But as Chloe became more feminine and attractive over time, and I aged and lost appeal, he made his choice.
I'm a man after all. Not blood related. I couldn't help myself.
It was Chloe's idea to spike our drinks with sleeping pills during the barbecue. After drugging John and me, their plan was to undress us, put us in the same bed, take photos of the scene, and then demand alimony. How foolish. I looked at them both with utter disdain, feeling far beyond mere contempt.
I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me. I beg you.
I'm really sorry too. I don't want to break up with John.
I said nothing, just kept staring at the two of them as they continued to bow their heads. No words came to mind. There was no way I could forgive them. How could I forgive them? Chloe, growing impatient with my silence, suddenly looked up and forcefully grabbed Mark's sleeve.
It's all your fault this happened. We have credit card payments due next week. What are we going to do now?
What? Why did you go shopping without telling me? I'm broke from my losses at the slots, and I've been using credit cards too. What are we going to do now, seriously?
This must be what they call a total mess. Chloe continued her aggressive behavior, pulling on Mark's hair and clothes, while Mark shouted, trying desperately to stop her. Their yelling must surely be heard by the neighbors. If it becomes known that a stepfather and his stepdaughter were involved, no one with normal sensibilities could continue living in this neighborhood. The same would be true for me. Thinking that I might never see the view outside my window again made me feel a bit sad. Afterward, Chloe and John divorced and moved far away. Chloe's life went downhill as she got into the nightlife, drowning in alcohol and accumulating debt. After paying a substantial amount of alimony, Mark was chased by debt collectors. His company went bankrupt, and he vanished almost like a fugitive, now living as a homeless person. After his divorce from Chloe, John found a suitable partner. I received alimony from Mark. Despite being chased by debt collectors after his company went bankrupt, how he managed to gather such a significant amount for alimony remains unclear, but he showed me his responsibility in the end. After divorcing Mark and selling our home, I decided to return to my parents' house. On the plane back to my hometown, I thought about many things. I had lost my husband to illness, remarried, then divorced again, and was even betrayed by my own daughter. How should I face my parents now? Around my parents' home, there are many wheat fields. Dragging my large suitcase, I continued down the long asphalt road, The weather was warm, just entering early summer. When I returned, my elderly parents didn't ask for any details. They simply accepted me. Why didn't my parents ask me anything? Were they pitying me? Yet, they didn't treat me like a delicate issue, but naturally accepted me. While looking out at the tranquil countryside, I knew I had to reassess my life. I managed to find a stable job through the local agricultural cooperative, thanks to my father's help. Since then, I've developed a good relationship with John's parents. We meet seldom, but when they are nearby, we sometimes have dinner together. What? Years after returning home, one spring, an unexpected event occurred. On the desk lay the wedding ring I had received from my late husband. A bit shaken, I picked up the ring and held it in my palm. As I stood there stunned, my mother came from the kitchen to wipe the table.
It's been quite a while. His parents came by some time ago. They insisted that they wanted you, Emily, to have it.
I stood speechless. Outside the window, there were wheat fields. In the clear blue sky, a bird continued to sing as if to claim, "I am here." Tears overflowed, and I slung my bag over my shoulder and rode off on my bicycle. I kept riding through the deserted wheat fields, sweating from my forehead, but continuing forward. What should I do now? I don't know, but I will keep moving forward. I think I'll save my complaints for after I've lived my life to the fullest.